Peter.
Hey, mate, how are you?
Hey, how are you? You look good there. You're doing good.
Yeah, thank you, mate. And from the image, I can see it looks like you're still in your tent and it's still dark
How was it?
on Kokoda, yeah?
Ah, let me see what we can do about that.
This reminds me of being on Kokoda with you that I'd be up and at 'em and I'd have to come and shake your tent and wake you up.
Yeah. It's kind of you've got a different memory than I have. It's funny how that works out. I seem to think, as a matter of fact, that reminds me of when I had the minister on the Kokoda track. Now, is that photograph coming up better? Or?
Hey, can you get your camera? There we go.
There he is.
Uh-huh.
It'd be a shame not to see your beautiful head this morning. So thanks for joining us, mate, and getting up and to have a chat to our crew, and we'll get straight into it. So, walking Kokoda is something that's best shared, and combined, you and I have walked 126 crossings.
I remember every single one of them, Peter, really well.
Yeah, I've done 2 and you've done 124.
Yeah, it seems to be that way. When are you coming back for number 127?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that, mate. There's a bit of a hint of an accent there. I don't know if anyone else can pick it up or not, but clearly Australia wasn't where you grew up. When
No,
did
that's
you
right.
arrive?
Yeah,
When did you arrive and what brought you out here?
well, it was actually a plane that brought me here, Peter, as you know.
Yeah, yeah, good.
It's an Irish
Well,
accent.
plenty came out on boats, mate. Plenty
Yeah,
of convicts came out on boats.
well, I think if the boats had been around in 1987 when I came out, I would have been on a boat. There's no doubt about that. That's for sure, you know. But yeah, 1987, I came out from Dublin, and I was in Pitt Street for the Welcome Home Parade for the Vietnam vets, and I was blown away that it had taken so long for finally the Australian population to welcome home these young lads who are now old men from Vietnam. And I stood there in Pitt Street and I was blown away by it. And I'd made a decision there and then that I would make sure that the history would never be forgotten. And that set me off on a journey. And, you know, 124 times across Kokoda track, 24 years later on the Kokoda track, plenty of other experiences as well, like the Simpson Desert in Tasmania and many other things as well. So here we are, and this is all part of the journey. And then, of course, I came across you.
Yeah, you did. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
Well, the thing is, I grew up in Dublin, so I actually grew up around the same time as Bono from U2. So he was an older fella, he was older than me. And so his mother used to hang around with my mother. But what was interesting with the whole thing was that I remember we had a little band. I used to be the lighting technician for this group, you know, this musicians. And in those days, what it meant was that you had to press one button that went the lights on, lights off. So it was highly technical, hence the reason why they gave it to me. But
yeah,
more importantly,
I saw your, mate,
well,
I saw your skill at that this morning. I saw your skill at that this morning, and I understand why you're working on Kokoda and not with Bono.
I think so too, and that's where I'm getting to, because it's a bit of a story here, Pete. Hold on. It's the fact that, well, you know, he used to come into the band room and he used to give the lads some advice, and we used to tell him, you know, to basically the F off. What would you know? Turns out that Bono knew a little bit about this whole music thing, you know. So, but we grew up in that environment where you were allowed to throw stones, and it was always about, you know, today. It was always about staying in the present. We never worried about tomorrow, and the whole aspect of careers, all that kind of stuff, that came second. It was all about having fun. And so it was a great place to grow up. So you could dance like nobody was watching type thing, you know. It was fantastic. Yeah. Great environment, but very creative as well. Like, so we came up with ways and being creative and how to get out of doing school. And more importantly, in Dublin, we became brilliant at reading the weather patterns, because when it came towards the end of the year into winter, if the snows looked like it was going to happen, you would stand out at night time looking at the sky. And if it looked like it was going to snow, well, you wouldn't bother doing your homework, because then you wouldn't have to go to school the next day. So it was always a gamble, but we became brilliant at it, you know? Yeah. Great place
hey,
to grow.
mate, just as we're chatting, I just want to draw everyone's attention to this part of the ride. Again, just beautiful roads, and you can see how close you are to the beach here. And this is one of the things that's so lovely about this ride is how close you get to the water and the communities. And again, the quality of the roads and the amount of traffic, it just makes for ideal riding. It's, yeah, just such a beautiful part to do. So you came out, and how old were you when you arrived and stepped off that plane here in Australia?
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, I've no idea what age I am because people ask me this question all the time. So the only time I know, honestly, if I go back and look at my passport. So, yeah, I was young. I'd actually come out to play football, so I was a soccer player as well.
Yeah, right.
So I'd actually, yeah, so I came out, and like I say, I fell in love with the history. And then while I was playing soccer, I managed to wangle my way into university, you know. So I done my first degree in exercise physiology, and
Yeah,
absolutely loved that because my whole thing was about human performance and what makes people tick. But more importantly, it was also about the history as well. The history, because there was patterns involved in it. You know, this is what happened in World War II. Well, if that happened, this was the patterns leading up to World War II. And then I could look back on it and say, well, how come nobody actually realized that this was going to happen? So I became fascinated with that thing. And then the human performance side of it as well, you know, in regards to what makes people tick. So I spent a lot of time in the athletes area, so the professional athlete area. And then I moved it across into corporate. So I did a lot of stuff at Microsoft. So I was at Microsoft for 14, 15 years, looking after their corporate health and well-being, and Computer Associates and Apple and many, many other organizations in the IT sector at that time. And so from there, it got to a stage where we were saying, well, it's great that we have all these beautiful well-being programs and we're fit and healthy, but how do we actually know when we're fit? And that was a big thing for me. So then we expanded across into events. So hence what you're doing here. So when you can do what Peter's doing here on the bicycle, well, then it tells you he's fit. So that was a simple solution. So we turned around, we started doing these events so people could actually test their fitness. So they were training for something. So they had a goal. It also had a meaning as well. So they were going up into Papua New Guinea. They were on an educational journey. We're getting the history, understanding the lay of the land, and then helping the people as well. So it was a brilliant formula. And so from there, the business continued to expand. But the whole fascination was in, well, what makes normal people tick? What goes on in their brain situation, their psychological planning, their programming to make them or give them the opportunity to be successful. And it was fantastic because we started to open up all these different areas. And when we used the history was a great yardstick. No matter how hard you were doing it, it could be worse. You could be getting shot at. And then people have gone before, they've created this legacy, the legacy of Kokoda, the legacy of the Black Cat Track, for example. So that history was a legacy. So it was a standard, you know, so people could look at that and say, wow, so this was the legacy. And yes, they did have a hard, and look, this is how they overcame all those obstacles, you know. So it was a brilliant, brilliant situation and a great experience. So then it continued to grow, and then we did other things as well. But it was the most important thing for me was it allowed me to jump across into other populations. So we did a lot of stuff with athletes. I left them behind because then it became more predictable because they have a natural or a developed psyche that says, hey, success. I was interested in the person who didn't or wasn't developed in that area, so that we could then convince them that they were capable of doing anything. And it's proved to be the case, you know.
Yeah, cool. So growing up, it's sport, it's football, it's you head into uni and you're studying sports science or so forth.
Yeah.
And then the turning point, as you described at the beginning, is seeing the march in, I think you said 87,
Correct,
with
yeah.
the Vietnam. Yeah. So when do you do your first Kokoda crossing?
First Kokoda crossing was around 1992. And it actually came about by the CEO of Microsoft. He turned around at the time and he said, Aidan, I want you to take my group up this thing in Papua New Guinea. It's called the Coca-Cola track. He wasn't sure of the name of it. So you got to understand, in those days, not many people knew much about the history. Not much people knew about the Kokoda track. So I did the research on it and I went up there the first time. And there was so many learnings on my first one because I got to see a population that were so in tune with where they were living. But more importantly, they'd been there for thousands upon thousands of years. And the way that culture was developed and the way they had managed to survive because of that culture was absolutely second to none. Simple thing like I landed in this little airstrip in the middle of the mountains called Kokoda Airstrip, and highly strategic in World War II. Hence the reason why we were fighting on the track. But when I landed there, I'll never forget it because I watched an Australian person get off the plane, and he was welcomed by a welcome committee. And the welcome committee was basically a native man who had feathers all over his head, and he was wearing, you know, a piece of fur, pretty much. And he came up, and I watched the Aussie guy say, mate, you need this, and you got to have a fridge, and you can get your food, and you can do all this stuff, and da-da-da-da-da. And I sat back and watched it because I learned from many, many previous situations, observations key. So when it was my turn, he came to me, and the first question I asked him was, well, what do you need? And he turned out to me and he says, well, Aidan, we don't need anything. We've been living here for thousands of years. We don't need anything.
Yeah.
We plant our crops, and once our crops grow, once you got rain for the crops to grow, we're happy, we have food. How we work is that, well, those who are strong, they'll go out during the day and they'll farm the field. So they've got a role, they've got a responsibility. And so the kids who are not quite there yet will stay in the villages, and the older people who now no longer are farmers, they'll pass their culture all the way down to the kids. So they spend each day in the village teaching these kids the way, so the culture survives. And it was fascinating because there I was. To me, that was a simple needs analysis. And of course, I learned later that as a consultant in needs analysis, you can charge all sorts of money for it. but it was one of the greatest learnings for me, you know. So here I was, and I connected with the people. And when I walked the track, it was all about the people. And then the story, the history of the track is second to none. And my fascination with it was, coming from Ireland, we're brought up with our history. So we know where we came from, and we're proud of our history, and we've connected and all that sort of stuff. And we have song, and we have dance, and we have poetry and stories and blah, 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 and Guinness, which is an important part of it. So I was looking at it from this point of view. So to me, I was calling it the greatest story never told. So it became a mission for me when I came back to tell everybody about this incredible story built around the values, the Australian values that are up there on monuments at Isarava. Now, myself and you, we can talk about Isarava and we both understand it. But many of your listeners, or many of the people who might tune into this, when we say Isarava, they go, what? Where's that? You know? But yet if we mention Gallipoli, everybody knows Gallipoli. But Isarava is probably arguably the most important battle site in Australian history, because in August 1942, the 26th of August 1942, if it wasn't for what 420 young kids did at the Battle of Isarava, the Japanese had nothing on the track to stop them going all the way to Port Moresby, and from there, potentially taking Australia. In which case, your whole world would have been different, all because of 420 young kids. Now, the profile of those young kids were, they weren't trained, they had the wrong uniforms, they weren't supplied well, they'd gone 7 or 8 days without a decent feed, and they were on their last legs, but they still hung in there. And I was lucky because I interviewed about 70 of them, and every single one of them I asked a question, you know, so what kept you going? What was the factor that kept you going? Where was the motivation? And every single one of them said, you know what, Aidan, even though it was hard, the holes that we were in were full of water. We were on the last legs. We lost so much weight. Our uniforms were falling off us. Our boots were falling off. Every single one of them turned around and said, Aidan, the thing that kept me going was the fact I knew my back was covered, mateship. I always believed my back was covered by my mates. No matter how hard it was, no matter how difficult it was, I always believed no matter my mate had my back. And that's what kept me going. And then the next question was, well, you were there, you're on your own, pretty much. How did you think you were going to get out of it? And they said, well, no, we thought we were going to die that afternoon. We thought it was all over. But we were prepared to lay our life down for Australia. And we were prepared to sacrifice the whole lot because we knew that if the Japanese had got to Moresby, they would take our families. And that's what they understood. So when I heard and saw and experienced this history, there was nothing else I could do because it became my whole drive, you know. And then
Aidan, there's, you know, I get goosebumps hearing just these small reminders of the stories you tell. And there's nothing more powerful than being on the track, standing at Isarava, standing at all of these places where Brigade Hill, all of these places where you can stand and very, very much visualize what's happening. You can see the foxholes on the side of the track, and you share the story with such knowledge and passion. And when you share the story, it's not something that is a tour guide who's learnt a script, but it's deep within you. It's your DNA, and it's almost embarrassing as Australians that we go there with such limited knowledge of the campaign, of the significance of the sacrifice. So this is what I explore within you. You do that first track with Microsoft. Where does it, is it first day? Is it halfway through? Is it the end? Is it a month after? Where you go, this is my calling. This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. It's just so important. You just immerse yourself in the history. At what point was the light go on?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you got to understand my background at the time. Like I could wake up and I could run a marathon, I could run 100 Ks, and that was my background. Wasn't a problem there. So fitness was a big thing for me, and I understood how the body worked and all that stuff. But in those early days, after doing one track, it would take me maybe 6 to 8 weeks to recover. Nowadays, I do 9 and 10 a year. So there's a massive building there. So I could see it in myself. So when I did the first track and I saw the changes occur in people when they had connection with their past, connection with who they are, because in that environment, as you know, it allows you the opportunity to peel back every single layer of society. So all the support systems, there's no mobile phones, there's no people saying, Peter, you're brilliant, Peter, you're brilliant, Peter, you're brilliant. Out there, you've got to find out who you are, and you've got to find and pick the plan that's necessary for that particular moment in time. And you've got to back yourself. And it's kind of like when you prepare for these kind of events, especially this one, you can prepare, I'd say 80%. And then the 20% extra, you can't prepare for it, but you learn to back yourself to say that when the unexpected 20% arrives, I'm capable of meeting that challenge. And that's what it teaches you. So what attracted me to it afterwards, I had people coming from all walks of life. I had women who were in all sorts of situations. I had rape victims. I had people who had disabilities. I had a guy with no legs. I had a guy with one leg. I had a guy with a heart transplant. I had a girl who was completely deaf. She couldn't hear. And it went on and on. And I saw the changes in these people and how strong they got by doing this stuff. Similar to what you're doing right now. There's no difference. It's at the end of the day, it's an opportunity to explore outside the realms of what society says you're capable of doing. In our society, and this is what I see, is that a lot of our kids, you know, everything is so sterile. Everything is so calculated. We take our kids, we drop them off at soccer at 4 o'clock, got to pick them up at 6. They got to have the shin guards, got to have this, they got to have that. And they're not allowed to play unless they do. So there's no room for creativity anymore. Everything has a structure. Everything has rules around it. So at what point in time do we get the chance to explore, to have fun, to play, and identify who you really are? And that's the key. Like about 4 months ago, I was down in Melbourne before this COVID thing. And I was doing a presentation at a school, and the junior school said, "Aidan, why don't you hang around for some tree therapy?" And I said, "All right, well, hey, that sounds good." And they brought me up the back, and they had all these ropes hanging out of trees, and they had all these little floor mats everywhere. And then they roped up all these kids, and they were teaching kids how to climb trees. And there's the problem. So we learned from an early age what risk analysis was. If me and you climbed a tree and we fell, we said, well, we won't do that again. I'll bring it down a little bit. So we learned risk analysis. Now it's so organized, structured, and sterilized. What you're doing here is crucial because it gives people an opportunity to get out there, explore, and find out who they really are. But the beauty about what you're doing here is you're also helping all these people. So it's also a great feeling as well. And this is what the formula was up on the Dakota track too. It was, oh my God, these people were there in 1942 and they're still here. And now we can actually do something to make a difference to their life, for education and everything else. And that's what it was. And we fell in love with that. So for me, the lights went on because it ticked every single box for me. And as you know, the stones up there is Sarava, mateship, sacrifice, endurance, and courage, the 4 key factors. Well, if you ask me what the Australian spirit is, I will tell you that's what it is. And so to see that in action is a brilliant thing. So I term this thing called practical intelligence. Don't tell me I can do it. Give me the opportunity to show that I can do it. So I call that practical intelligence, the ability to apply. So in our society, we get a lot of people will stand up on the stage and say, yes, you can, yes, you can. But nobody actually shows you. So go be with the days when your dad or somebody around you would show you how to hit a nail with a hammer. Those days are gone. Nobody has the time anymore. So we're losing that. Hence the reason why this stuff becomes so important, because you actually get to walk the talk. And it throws everything on its side. You can have every theory until the cows come home. We talk about leadership, Peter. We've both been around a lot of deep things, but there's theories left, right, and center. But when it comes down to the crunch, it still needs somebody to throw that stone. It still needs a Peter Baines to go up and say, that tsunami, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to change people's lives. I'm going to make a difference. It still needs that, and that's what we became, stone throwers.
You said a few minutes ago about we can prepare for 80% and 20% is just unknown, and yesterday at lunch, I had a chat with Cam Mostyn, and Cam was one of 4 who rode across the Atlantic Ocean, 4,600 Ks, and very much there's things that you're going to learn and experience that you can't train for, that you just can't replicate. And it's the same with the track. And you got to wonder how many people, how many businesses miss opportunities because they're waiting to have all of the answers to all of the questions. And we know that the answers often come in that final 20%, and you've got to have that trust and courage to step forward, yeah?
It's exactly right. And a lot of people will walk away at that 80% mark as well. The beauty about the track is, because it's so isolated, you can't walk away. You've got no choice. You've got to continue on. And you're dead right. You're dead right. It's that last final furlong. People get so close, and it's almost like a fear of success as well. So it's kind of like facilitation becomes essential. Knowing when to put your hand on somebody and say, you know what, you're going to be okay. Because if you do that at the wrong time, well, then you're rescuing someone. You're creating a victim, and you'll be really careful of that. So it's about an individual's journey. It's about them becoming strong, independent, looking for the factors that are inside everybody, but some cases they're hidden deeply and for all sorts of different reasons, So it's giving them the opportunity to get outside.
I want to explore what you just said there, because I think it's a really key part, and I've heard you talk about it on the track before, and I think it's a really valuable insight for the leaders. And the comment was to know when to put your hand on their shoulder and say you're going to be okay, and don't create a victim, but provide the encouragement and the reassurance that they will be okay. Is it, it must be such a challenge to find, or is it a challenge to find the balance in the different people who some are giving it all and some are giving up pretty quick? How do you know when's the time to put your hand on the shoulder?
Yeah, and that's crucial. So that goes back to my first point when I went to Papua New Guinea, observation. Observation is one of the most critical skills that you can have. The ability to sit back and observe. And when you sit back and observe, you'll see everything. You'll see people and how they interact with the environment, how they hold themselves, posture. Posture is a big indicator to me. I can tell a person's personality by their posture. So there's all those aspects that you take into this thing. Now, when we're in a leadership point of view, we put other individuals in roles because we believe they're capable of doing them. And then you need to let them grow. You need to give them the opportunity to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. But and I think that's the biggest problem we face, is that in our society, we're looking for perfection all the time without giving people an opportunity to grow. And when we grow means a lot of different things. But in those kind of environments, I watch absolutely everything. So I watch what they do, how they eat, how they interact with others. And there's so many individuals. So it's basically given me, 20, 25 people that I've never met before. And I've spoken to them on the phone maybe 2 or 3 times. And all of a sudden, there they are. And they're in the jungle with me. And I've got to get them from A to B. So as you know, over 8 days. So they're going to go through all sorts of different challenges. I've got to make sure that somewhere along the way, I get to know them very closely. And then they invest trust in me. And the only way they can invest trust in me is through consistency in my actions. So you must have the courage of your convictions. You must be strong on that. You must have integrity, because if you veer and you're all over the place and you adjust to suit every single situation, people don't have any consistency. They will have no faith in you. They have no trust in you. And I see that even from a local point of view up there in Papua New Guinea. So from a village native point of view, they listen to me because for the last 24 years, I've been saying the same thing. I've been very consistent in what I say. I've been very consistent in my behaviors because I've been totally honest. And when you're honest, there's a pureness that you never veer from. So integrity in leadership is absolutely essential because people look for that, especially when the chips go down, especially in the hard times. Well, I can rely on that. And the
What
thing
about,
is as well,
how often you talk about that and you talk about leadership and so forth? How often do you see a group assemble, 25 people that you haven't met? Some of them will know each other, some will not. How often do you see that there's the alpha personality at the beginning, and then you've got someone who you're watching, they're not saying a lot, they're very quiet, they're at the back, but a couple of days in, they're the true leaders, not the loudest.
Let me tell you, I'll give you a story about that'll indicate it. Long time ago, we had a young kids, group of street kids. The operators rang me and said, look, we've got a group, we want you to take them up on the Kokoda track. There's one kid, he's an absolute pain. We don't want him. The police had rang me and said, this kid's 15, you either take him up there and sort him out, otherwise he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. Anyway, I was interested in him. So I took him out for a walk and I got to know him a little bit. He opened up to me. I gave him some stuff. He gave me some stuff. I went back to the organizer and said, look, I want this kid on the track no matter what. The kid walked the track. He got on the track and he wasn't part of the cool group. He was totally isolated. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. And I asked the kids, why treat him like this? And groups tend to do that. They tend to use somebody as a yardstick and it makes them feel good, but it ostracizes the person. So they say, oh, he's weird. He doesn't talk. He's this, he's that. Anyway, so I was watching this carefully and I would tell the history with messages in it. This is what Stan Bissett went through. This is what Charlie McCallum. And there was always a little hook in it for anybody who's smart enough to pick it up. And they did. So as we were walking the track, this kid turns around to me and he says, Aidan, he said, do you mind if I sleep around the fire with the porters, the local lads, and we call them legends. And I said, look, as long as they're okay with it, and you're not causing a problem. And I'd prepped the guys beforehand that this was likely to happen. And they said, no, it's okay. So he would sleep beside him at the fire. Then as the day got on, the next day, he turned around, he got a job. So his job was to get the water for the group, go down to the river with the buckets, bring the water back, then the fire. They taught him how to do a fire. They taught him how to do this. So effectively what they were doing was they were giving him a role, they were giving him a responsibility, but more importantly, they were giving him recognition. So the three key areas, you give him a role, the responsibility of looking after the group, and then the recognition. So effectively what happened was he had found a tribe that welcomed him. So he now had a position. In our society, see, we tend to ostracize people who are different. This up there was all about survival. All the locals saw was a kid who was displaying survival instincts like they do every day of the week. That was their currency. So when we talk about leadership, we need to talk about currency. What is your currency, Peter? Why do we talk the same? That's our currency. So with this situation, this kid now had a tribe. So as we got to, Butch Bissett, where Butch Bissett lost his life, and as you know, I sing Danny Boy. So I'm singing Danny Boy in remembrance. And at the end of it, I turned around, I said to the kids, look, is anybody here that wants to say anything? And as you know with kids go, oh, don't pick me, the head's down. Anyway, out of nowhere, this kid who's never spoke before, he gets out, stands up on the rock and he goes, ain't no mountain high enough. And he's singing his head off, and we're all looking at him going, what the hell's happened here? And he's just letting it go and he's got all the moves and he's shaking and he's doing all this stuff, it was fantastic. Anyway, when he was finished, he got down off the rock, picked up his bag and off he walked. Now, what actually happened there was over the next few days, the other kids now said, well, hang on a minute, this kid's actually okay. So then they tried to bring him back into their tribe. So they would walk with him and he wouldn't allow it because now he knew that he had a value. And he's going, well, hang on a minute, no. I'm not coming back into your tribe. I'm somebody. I've got a role, recognition, responsibility. Anyway, so it walked on like this. This kid got stronger and he'd leave his bag up the top, run down and help somebody who was a bit weaker, help them. So now he became this thing, this leader. And so by the end of the track, he was a different kid. Anyway, flew back to Brisbane, got through Brisbane, and I'm on my way home, driving home. And his mother rang me and said, I don't know what happened up there, but when my child, when he came through customs, he ran up to me, put his arms around me, he said, I love you, Mum. She said, I've never heard that in my life. He's never, ever showed any affection whatsoever. He said, I love you, Mum. And I said, well, stay tuned. So the next week she rings me and she says, you're not going to believe what's happened here. He's created this list of all his loser mates And he's rang them one after the other and said, I don't want anything to do with you because you're leading me astray. You're leading me astray. I don't want anything to do with it. So we got him a job. And then the kid has gone on and he's a fantastic fella. But the difference was he was Asperger. So he was on the autistic spectrum. And nobody had identified it from a young age. And so because I could see it and I saw it on the track and how he developed, it changed his whole life. And that's what happens.
Aidan, it certainly does change lives. And, you know, you talk about role, responsibility and recognition. And, you know, I reckon that there's a few people writing that down, going, how can I create that for my kids? How can I implement that better? And so clear, so succinct. We had an amazing organisation called Backtrack. Had a couple of young fellas with Matt, their guardian, who came and rode with us in Thailand this year. And, you know, these kids come from challenging backgrounds, and having them present was just incredible. And we saw, you know, these kids turn up and, you know, the only interaction they've had with, you know, lawyers and so forth before was when they might have been cross-examined, or, you know, now they're riding next to them. And you know, no different than being on the track. When you're on the bike, you walk down in the morning and all the titles, all the labels, it's all gone. We're all equal. And seeing these kids from Backtrack, you know, just do exactly what you talked about there. And we heard from Matt, we heard from Bernie around the change. And, you know, sometimes it's just giving people an opportunity, isn't it?
Well, you know, Peter, you're right. And that's crucial. You know, one of the big things that I've seen with it is in our society, we tend to sit down with kids who've got major issues, and they've been brought up through, you know, pain. And we try to talk to them about emotion. So we're going back to this thing we call currency. So if you're speaking Chinese and I'm speaking English, we're not going to understand each other. So they only understand pain. They don't understand emotion. But in our society, we tend to talk to them in an emotional point of view. So when you give them the opportunity to do the stuff that you're talking about, you take them on the Kokoda track, you take them to Thailand, you get them the opportunity to go the extra yard, you get them, what actually happens is they go through the physical challenge of the mountains, and somewhere along the way, there's emotional reactions attached to that physical reaction. So when they hear the history, when they hear the sadness of the history, those emotions are evoked, and they don't understand them. All they understand is the pain of the mountains, up and down, up and down. So by the end of the track, it's almost like they've gone through a catharsis. All those negative emotions, all those viruses in here that they've been told all their life that they can't, are completely cleansed. And now they've got this thing called, yes, you can. And yes, I can. And yes, I've got people who believe in me. And yes, I've got the recognition. And you're absolutely spot on. This stuff is so the answer, because from a cognitive point of view, a cognitive behavioral point of view, we can actually reprogram. And we've done this. We've had it so many times with police officers, with army, with PTSD. We've done it with footballers. A perfect example is an AFL team, without mentioning the name. I turned around to a coach. I was observing again. I was watching, you know, and I said, look, when you're coaching, typical coaching program, you stop playing, you go, I don't like that strategy, don't like that skill. Let's redesign it and do this. You do this, and then you recreate it. That's coaching. And I said to him, I said, so what do you do for a player who's on the verge of burnout, or who's shown that disregard, all this stuff, and it's psychological? I said, what we do is we send him off to a psych, you know, sports psych. And I said, can I track that? And he said, yeah. So I tracked it. So there was two that stood out clearly. And so what they did was they made an appointment to see a sports psych. It took them 2 weeks to get to see the sports psych. Then they had to sit down with the sports psych, and then they had to recreate what was going on. Now, I'm looking at it from a sports psych point of view, and I'm thinking, well, you've missed out on about 45% of what was happening. And there's your problem. So I went back to the coach and I said, look, do you mind if I take control of it? And he said, by all means. So I said, okay, I'm going to use the same model that you've got. And the model that you've got is you stop play. So I went, stop. And I went, come here. And we talked about mental programming. And so we gave them some tips in regards to, you know, being in the present. We weren't looking at this, looking at visualization, all that kind of stuff. And they took it home, and then we followed it up. And it was a huge difference, massive outcome. These players then became new players. It was almost like they were re-energized. And the thing was, or the answer or the solution to it was that we were able to address it in the now as it is occurring. And that's why these programs are so important, and that's why they work, because you can address the behavior as it occurs, not 2 weeks' time when you go to see a counselor, not 2 weeks' time when you go to see a sports psychologist. It's too late. It's too late.
Yeah.
It's already ingrained. It becomes a pattern already, you know?
Mate, there's people listening to this, and I'm sure there's more than one who have said, I always wanted to do Kokoda, or it's on my bucket list, and then there might be that 20% which is holding them back. And every chance I get, I talk about and encourage people to do Kokoda, and I point them in your direction. And so don't do it unless you're doing it with Aidan. But people want to know about the size of the challenge and how fit they have to be. And I'm a bit simple, as you know, but my response is often, well, it's just walking. It's not another skill that you have to learn. I said, you know, get in contact with Aidan. He'll sort it all out. So people listening now who might be thinking, this is what I'd love to do with my daughter, my son, my brother, my best mate, my mum or dad, talk them through what they need to be, what kind of condition, how hard, how accessible is it, and what a day on the track looks like.
Okay, so let's first of all talk about it. So I've been across the track 124 times. Now, in 124 times, I've not had anybody not finish it. So 100% success. So when people ask me, why do I have a unique record? Well, the reason being is we insist on 3 months lead up. So 3 months preparation time. And you don't have to have a huge, enormous level of fitness. It comes down to what you have inside. So that's where the test will be. So if you're able to run, 5 to 10 Ks, no problem, you're fit enough to do this stuff. It's more or less, the opportunity is, it starts off from day one, and it's an accumulation. So it's an accumulation of what you do in day one and then day 8. So it's how you handle that accumulation. So it could be a situation where, yesterday we had rain and tonight I'm not sleeping. Next day you're getting more tired, or you're worn down a little bit more. And it's how you handle those situations. And that's where the test is. So from a preparation point of view, I believe anybody can do it. I really do. I believe anyone can do it. I've had all sorts of different people. I've had people with no legs. I've had people with one leg, as I said. I've got people who had, heart conditions. Anybody can do it. Absolutely anybody can do it, as long as you're prepared to do that 3 months lead up work. That's crucial, because then it gives you the opportunity, first of all, to get yourself fit, understand the challenges, and then to also get your equipment right as well. So having the right equipment is also part of it, So, and then the history is what gets you through, the presentation of the history, because when you hear the history, you get so much strength from it. And the fact is that, well, these guys, look what they went through. And if they can go through it, well, I can certainly go through it. So it's not like Gallipoli where you get on the tour bus and the tour bus drops you off. Here, you've got to do the hard yards. And so to answer your question in simplest form, I believe anybody can do it. I really can. After, 24 years, no problem.
Mate, we're coming to the end of the session this morning, and it's been a great chat. And as always, I learn something more each time I spend time with you. And hopefully there's people who are sitting there going, yeah, I love it. For me, it was role responsibility recognition today, and we will share on the website your company, our Spirit, how to get in contact, how to book the next tour. We didn't get to talk about the impact of COVID on you or the villages and so forth, but we've just run out of time. But the other thing, there's so many valuable leadership lessons you've talked about there. And for those who would like to know more about that, hear more, you're joining us in our membership program with Future of Leadership, and where people get to spend a lot more time just talking about the leadership lessons. So if you're interested in connecting with Aidan, hearing longer sessions from Aidan, Future of Leadership membership program, jump onto that. Any trouble, shoot us through a message at Hands and we'll support you in that. And all of that work is what underwrites Hands Group to keep the charity going. So Aidan, it's been great sharing some time with you again. Just quickly before we finish up, what are you doing right now since you're not out there trekking?
Well, I'm still out walking. I'm lucky because I live up here in the Gold Coast. I've got, Lamington National Park. But if you watch my messages on social media, they're very subliminal. in the use of nature. So right now, with the world the way it is, it needs good people to step up and, you know, offer some of the solutions or offer some of the light moving forward. It's an interesting situation, but I'm doing a lot of that. I'm doing a lot of writing, so it's allowing me to do stuff that I never would have had time. So working on a lot of programs, and that's going really good. And also, I started the book. So for many, many years, people have been asking me to write the book. So now has an opportunity to start that, you know. So I've revisited all the old stuff and the old notes that I've had there. I've never had a chance to do. So it's been good from that point of view, you know. Obviously, there's a challenge, you know, and I think in the market that I'm in as well, you get a lot of cowboys and they copy my stuff, and that can be a problem because then when it comes to delivery, they fall over. But good. Yeah.
Well done, mate. And I look forward to the book, and especially all the comedy lines I've given you over the years we spent together. Good on you, mate. I love you, brother. Love the time that we spend together, and you as a human. So you're a good fella. All right, CT, back to you.
Thank
Likewise,
you, PB. And hey, Aidan, and thank you, Aidan. That was, I always loved listening to your stories. I've probably heard them 100 times from my husband, and I feel like I've probably done Kokoda twice as well. Because I've got all the stories from your amazing trips, but you're an absolute champion, and it's been a pleasure having you on this morning. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and continue. What you're doing is amazing, absolutely brilliant, you know. And as you know, I'll support you through thick and thin because I believe in you, and I believe in Peter, and I believe in what you're doing.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Aidan. You're a good guy.
All right, I'll check out.
So team, that brings us to the end of another 25 kilometers on the bike. Well done. We're 10 days into our challenge. We've got 20 to go. So we're a third of the way through, and everyone's doing amazing. So congratulations to you all. Don't forget to log your Ks on My Virtual Mission, and obviously the recordings and the audio from today's interview will be available on YouTube. I'm sure you'll all agree it's a fantastic chat with Aidan. He just brings so much insight to leadership from a very different perspective. So really great guy to have interviewed this morning. Coming up later today, so we've got Greg Wallace joining us on the 12 o'clock Zoom. So Greg, you guys heard from, so those of you who are on the 7 o'clock every day, you would have heard from Greg last week. We love his story so much, so we thought we'd bring him back for the 12 o'clock so that those guys can hear from Greg. And yeah, we've got some awesome interviews lined up for the rest of the week and next week. So keep on coming back. We love seeing you, and keep pedaling. Thanks, Pete, for this morning.
Pleasure.
And we'll see you all again soon. Have a great day, everyone.
Everyone.